Lest Darkness Fall continues as read by the bathroom reader. I'm covering for the plurality report. Who worries that we might run out of voices to do for all these different characters? Ugh. Chapter 11. After some searching, Padway located Theudahad in the Aryan library. The little man was barricaded behind a huge load of books. 4 bodyguards sprawled on a table, a bench, and the floor, snoring thunderously. The librarian was staring at them with a look compounded of hydrofluoric acid and cobra venom, but did not dare protest. Theudahad looked up blearily.
"Oh, yes. It's the publisher fellow. Martinez, isn't it?"
"That's right, my lord. I might add that I'm your new quester."
"What? What? Who told you so?"
"You did. You appointed me."
"Oh, dear me. So I did. Silly of me. When I get engrossed in books, I really don't know what's going on. Let's see, you and Leodaris were going to fight the Imperialists, weren't you?"
"Hawkile, my lord. It's all over."
"I suppose you sold out to Belisarius, didn't you? I hope you arranged for an estate and an annuity from Justinian for me."
"It wasn't necessary, my lord. We won."
"What?"
Padway gave a resume of the last 3 days' events. "And you'd better get to bed early tonight, my lord. We're leaving in the morning for Florence."
"Florence? Why in heaven's name?"
"We're on our way to intercept your generals, Asenar and Grippas. They're coming back from Dalmatia, having been ordered out by the imperial general Constantianus. If we can catch them before they get to Ravenna and learn about Witiges, we might be able to get your crown back." Theudahad sighed.
"Yes, I suppose we ought to. But how did you know that Asenar and Grippas were coming home?"
"Trade secret, my lord. I've also sent a force of 2,000 to reoccupy Naples. It's held by General Herodianus with a mere 300, so there shouldn't be much trouble." Theudahad narrowed his watery eyes.
"You do get things done, Martinez. If you can deliver that vile usurper Witiges into my hands, I'll send clear to Constantinople for a torturer, if I can't find one ingenious enough in Italy."
Padway did not answer that one, having his own plans for Witiges. He said instead, "I have a pleasant surprise for you. The pay chests of the Imperial Army."
"Yes?"
Theudahad's eyes gleamed.
"They're mine, of course. Very considerate of you, excellent Martinez."
"Well, I did have to dip into them a little to pay our troops and clear up the army's bills, but you'll find the rest an agreeable addition to the royal purse. I'll be waiting for you at home." Padway neglected to state that he had sequestered over half the remainder and deposited the money with Tomasis. Who owns the pay chests of a captured army, especially when the captor is a volunteer theoretically serving one of 2 rival kings, was a question that the legal science of the time was hardly equipped to decide. In any event, Padway was sure he could make better use of the money than Theudahad. "I'm becoming quite a hardened criminal," he thought with pride. Padway rode up to Cornelius Anicius's home. Its rhetorical owner was out at the baths, but Dorothea came out. Padway had to admit that it made him feel pretty good to sit on a powerful horse in a, to him, romantic get-up with a cloak and boots and all, and report to one of the prettier girls of Rome on his success. She said,
"You know, Martinez, Father was silly at first about your social standing, but after all you've done, he's forgotten about that. Of course, he is not enthusiastic about Gothic rule, but he much prefers Theudahad, who is a scholar, to that savage Witiges." "I'm glad of that. I like your old man." "Everybody's talking about you now. They call you Mysterious Martinez."
"I know. Absurd, isn't it?"
"Yes, you never seemed very mysterious to me, in spite of your foreign background."
"That's great. You're not afraid of me, are you?"
"Not in the least. If you made a deal with Satanas, as some people hint, I'm sure the devil got the worst of it."
They laughed.
She added, "It's nearly dinner time. Won't you stay? Father will be back any time."
I'm sorry, but I can't possibly. We're off to the wars again tomorrow. As he rode off, he thought, if I should change my mind about the expediency of marriage, I'd know where to begin. She's attractive and pleasant and has what passes for a good education here. Padway made one more attempt to shake Belisarius, but without success. He did, however, enlist 500 of the imperial cuirassiers as a personal guard. His share of the imperialist loot would suffice to pay them for some weeks. After that, he'd see. The trip to Florence was anything but pleasant. It rained most of the way, with intermittent snow squalls as they climbed toward the City of Flowers. Being in a hurry, Padway took only cavalry. In Florence, he sent his officers around to buy warmer clothes for the troops, and looked in on his business. It seemed to be surviving, though Fritheric said, "I don't trust any of them, excellent boss. I'm sure the foreman and this George Menandrus have been stealing, though I can't prove it. I don't understand all this writing and figuring. If you leave them alone long enough, they'll steal everything, and then where will we be? Out in the cold, headed for a pair of nameless graves." "We'll see," said Padway. He called in the treasurer, Proclus, and asked to see the books. Proclus instantly looked apprehensive, but he got the books. Padway waded into the figures. They were all nice and neat, since he himself had taught the treasurer double-entry bookkeeping. All his employees were astounded to hear Padway burst into a shout of laughter.
What is it, noble sir?"
asked Proclus.
"Why, you poor fool, didn't you realize that with my system of bookkeeping, your little thefts would stick up in the accounts like a sore toe? Look here, 30 solidi last month, and 9 solidi, and some sesterces only last week. You might just as well have left a signed receipt every time you stole something."
What? What are you going to do to me?" "Well, I ought to have you jailed and flogged." Padway was silent for a while, and watched Proclus squirm. "But I hate to have your family suffer, and I certainly oughtn't to keep you on after this. But I'm pretty busy, and I can't take the time to train a new treasurer to keep the books in a civilized manner. So I'll just take 1/3 of your salary until these little borrowings of yours are paid back." Thank you kindly, sir, but just to be fair, George Menandrus ought to pay a share of it too. He—" "Liar!" shouted the editor. "Liar yourself. Look, I can prove it. Here's an item for 1 solidus, November 10th, and on November 11th, George shows up with a pair of new shoes and a bracelet. I know where he bought them. On the 15th. "How about it, George?" asked Padway. Menandrus finally confessed, though he insisted that the thefts were merely temporary borrowings to tide him over until payday. Padway divided the total liability between the two of them. He warned them sternly against recidivism. Then he left a set of plans with the foreman for new machines and metalworking processes, including plans for a machine for spinning copper plate into bowls. The intelligent Nerva caught on immediately. As Padway was leaving, Fritheric asked him, "Can I go with you, excellent Martinus? It's very dull here in Florence, and you need somebody to take care of you. I've saved up almost enough to get me jeweled sword back, and if you'll let—" "No, old man, I'm sorry, but I've got to have one person I can trust here. When this damned war in politics is over, we'll see." Fritheric sighed gustily.
"Oh, very well, if you insist. But I hate to think of your going around unprotected with all these treacherous Greeks and Italians and Goths. You'll end in an unmarked grave yet, I fear."
They shivered and skidded across the icy Apennines to Bologna. Padway resolved to have his men's horses shod if he could ever get a few days to spare. Stirrups had been invented, but not horseshoes. From Bologna to Padua, still largely in ruins from its destruction by Attila's Huns, The road was no longer the splendid stone-paved affair they had earlier traveled on, but a mere track in the mud. However, the weather turned almost spring-like, which was something. At Padua, they found they had missed the Dalmatian force by one day. Theodahad wanted to halt.
"Martinez," he whined, "you've dragged my old bones all over northern Italy, and nearly frozen me to death. That's not considerate. You do owe your king some consideration, don't you?"
Padway repressed his irritation with some effort. "My lord, do you or don't you want your crown back?" So poor Theodahad had to go along. By hard riding they caught up with the Dalmatian army halfway to Atria. They heaved past thousands and thousands of Goths, afoot and on horses. There must have been well over 50,000 of them. All these big, tough-looking men had skedaddled at the mere thought that Count Constantianus was approaching. The Count had only a small force, but Padway was the only one present who knew that, and his source of information was not strictly kosher. The Goths cheered Theodahad and Padway's Gothic lancers, and stared and muttered at the 500 cuirassiers. Padway had made his guard don Gothic helmets and Italian military cloaks in lieu of the spiked steel helmets and burnoose-like mantles they had worn, but still their lean chins, tight pants, and high yellow boots made them sufficiently different to arouse suspicion. Padway found the two commanders near the head of the column. Asenar was tall and Grippus was short, but otherwise both were just a couple of middle-aged and bewhiskered barbarians. They respectfully saluted Theodahad, who seemed to move slightly from so much latent force. Theodahad introduced Padway as his new prefect. No, he meant his new quaestor. Asenar whispered to Padway,
"In Padua, we heard a rumor that war and usurpation had been going on in Italy. Just what is the news, anyway?"
Padway was for once thankful that his telegraph hadn't been operating that far north. He laughed scornfully. "Oh, our Lord General Witigius had a brainstorm a couple of weeks ago. He put himself up in Ravenna where the Greeks couldn't kill him, and had himself proclaimed king. We've cleaned up the Greeks and are on our way to settle with Witigius now. These boys will be a help." All of which was rather unjust to Witigius. Padway wondered whether there'd be anything left of his character after a few years in this mendacious atmosphere. The two Gothic generals accepted his statement without comment. Padway decided quickly that neither of them could be called very bright. They marched into Ravenna at noon 2 days later. The mists were so thick about the northern causeway that a man had to precede the leading horsemen on foot to keep them from spattering off into the marsh. There was some alarm in Ravenna when the force appeared in the fog. Padway and Theodahad prudently kept quiet as Asenar and Grippus identified themselves. As a result, most of the huge force was in the city before anybody noticed the little gray man with Padway. Immediately there were shouts and runnings to and fro. Presently a Goth in a rich red cloak dashed out to the head of the column. He shouted,
"What the devil's going on here? Have you captured Theodahad, or is it the other way around?"
Asenar and Grippus sat their horses and muttered,
Well, that is..."
Padway spurred up front and asked the Goth, "Who are you, my dear sir?"
"If it's any of your business, I'm Eunulas Wilcharsson, General of our Lord Witigius, King of the Goths and Italians. Now who are you?"
Padway grinned and replied smoothly, "I'm delighted to know you, General Eunulas. I'm Martin Padway, quaestor to old Lord Theodahad, King of the Goths and Italians. Now that we know each other..."
"But you fool, there isn't any King Theodahad. He was deposed. We got a new king, or hadn't you heard about it?"
Oh, I've heard lots of things, but, my excellent Eunilas, before you make any more rude remarks, consider that we, that is to say King Theudahad, have over 60,000 troops in Ravenna, whereas you have about 12,000. You don't want any unnecessary unpleasantness, do you?
Why, you impudent, did you say 60,000?
Maybe 70. I haven't counted them.
Oh, that's different.
I thought you'd see it that way.
What are you gonna do?
Well, if you can tell where General Witigius is, I thought we might pay him a visit.
He's getting married today. I think he ought to be on his way to St. Vitalis' church by now.
You mean he hasn't married Mathaswantha yet?
Nah, there was some delay in getting his divorce.
Quick, how do we get to St. Vitalis' church? Padway hadn't hoped to be in time to interfere with Witigius's attempt to engraft himself on the Amal family tree by a forcible marriage with the late Queen Amalaswantha's daughter. But this was too good an opportunity to let it slip. Eunilas pointed out a dome flanked by 2 towers. Padway shouted to his guard and kicked his horse into a canter. The 500 men galloped after him, spattering unfortunate pedestrians with mud. They thundered across a bridge over one of Ravenna's canals, the stench from which fully lived up to its reputation, and reached the door of St. Vitalis' church. There were a score of guards at the door, through which organ music wafted faintly. The guards brought their spears up to a poise. Padway reined in and turned to the commander of his guard, a Macedonian named Achilles. "Cover them," he snapped. There was a quick, concerted movement among the cuirassiers who had been sorting themselves into a semicircle in front of the church door. The next instant, the guards were looking at 100 stiff Byzantine bows drawn to the cheek. "Nu," said Padway in Gothic, "if you boys will put your stickers down and your hands up, we have an appointment." "Ah, that's better, much better." He slid off his horse. "Achilles, give me a troop. Then surround the church and keep those inside in and those outside out until I finish with Witigius." Padway marched into St. Vitalis' church with 100 cuirassiers at his heels. The organ music died with a wail, and people turned to stare at him. It took his eyes a few seconds to become accustomed to the gloom. In the center of the huge octagon towered a pickle-faced Arian bishop, before whom stood 3 people. One was a big man in a long, rich robe, wearing a crown on his dark graying hair. King Witigius. Another was a tall girl with a strawberries and cream complexion and hair plaited in thick golden braids, the Princess Mathaswantha. The third was an ordinary Gothic soldier, somewhat cleaned up, who stood beside the bride and held her arm behind her back. The audience was a handful of Gothic nobles and their ladies. Padway walked purposefully down the aisle as people squirmed, rustled in their seats, and murmured.
The Greeks have come to Ravenna."
The bishop addressed Padway.
"Young man, what is the meaning of this intrusion?"
"You'll soon learn, my lord bishop. Since when has the Arian faith countenanced the taking of a woman to wife against her will?"
"What's that? Who is being taken against her will? What business is this wedding of yours? Who are you, young man? Who dares to interrupt?"
Padway laughed his most irritating laugh. "One question at a time, please. I am Martinus Padway, questor to King Theudahad. Ravenna is in our hands, and prudent persons will comport themselves accordingly. As for the wedding, it is not usually necessary to assign a man to twist the bride's arm to make sure she gives the right answers. You do not want to marry this man, do you, my lady?" Mathaswantha jerked her arm away from the soldier, who had been relaxing his grip. She made a fist and punched him in the nose with enough force to rock his head back on its hinges. Then she swung at Witigius, who dodged back.
You beast!" she cried. "I'll claw your eyes!"
The bishop grabbed her arm. "Calm yourself, my daughter. Please, this is the house of God."
King Witiges had been blinking at Padway, gradually soaking in the news. Mathas Waintha's attack had shocked him out of his lethargy. He growled, "You're trying to tell me that the miserable pen-pusher Theodahad has taken the town? My town?" "That, my lord, is true. I fear you'll have to abandon your idea of becoming an Ameling and ruling the Goths. But we'll—" Witiges's face had been turning darker and darker red. Now he burst into a shocking roar. "You swine!" he yelled. "You think I'll hand over my crown and my bride peaceably? By Jesus, I'll see you in the hottest hell first!" As he spoke, he whipped out his sword and ran heavily at Padway, his gold-embroidered robe flapping. Padway was not entirely taken by surprise. He got his own sword out and parried Witiges's terrific downward cut easily enough, though the force of the blow almost disarmed him. Then he found himself chest to chest with the Goth, hugging the barrel torso and chewing Witiges's pepper and salt beard. He tried to shout up to his men, but it was like trying to talk with a mouthful of shredded wheat. He spat out, and it seemed, half a bale of the stuff. Grab him, boys! Don't hurt him!" That was easier said than done. Witiges struggled like a captive gorilla, even when 5 men were hanging onto him, and he bellowed and foamed all the while. The Gothic gentlemen were standing, some with hands on their sword hilts, but in a hopeless minority. None seemed anxious to die for his king just then. Witiges began to sob between roars. "Tie him up until he cools off," said Padway unfeelingly. "My lord bishop, may I trouble you for pen and paper?" The bishop looked bleakly at Padway and called a sexton, who led Padway to a room off the vestibule. Here he sat down and wrote, "Martinus Padway to Tomasus the Syrian. Greetings. My dear Tomasus, I am sending you with this letter the person of Witiges, former king of the Goths and Italians. His escort has orders to deliver him to your house secretly. So forgive me for any alarm they cause you if they get you out of bed. As I remember, we have a telegraph tower under construction on the Flaminian Way near Helvellyn. Please arrange to have a chamber constructed in the earth underneath this tower and fitted up as an apartment forthwith. Incarcerate Witiges therein with an adequate guard. Have him made as comfortable as possible, as I judge him a man of moody temperament, and I do not wish him to harm himself. The utmost secrecy is to be observed at all times. That should not be too difficult, as this tower is in a wild stretch of country. It would be advisable to have Witiges delivered to the tower by guards other than those who take him to Rome, and to have him guarded by men who speak neither Latin nor Gothic. They shall release their prisoner only on my order, delivered either in person or via the telegraph, or without orders in the event of my imprisonment or death. With best regards, Martinus Padway." Padway said to Witiges, "I'm sorry to have to treat you so roughly, my lord. I would not have interfered if I hadn't known it was necessary to save Italy." Witiges had relapsed into morose taciturnity. He glared silently. Padway continued, "I'm really doing you a favor, you know. If Theodahad got hold of you, you would die, slowly." There was still no reply. "Oh well, take him away, boys. Wrap him up so the people won't recognize him, and use the back streets." Theodahad peered moistly at Padway.
"Marvelous, marvelous, my dear Martinus. The royal council accepted the inevitable. The only trouble is that the evil usurper had my crown altered to fit his big head. I'll have to alter it back. Now I can devote my time to some real scholarly research. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to ask you. Oh yes, what did you do with Witiges?"
Padway put on a benign smile. "He's out of your reach, my lord king."
"You mean you killed him? Now that's too bad. Most inconsiderate of you, Martinus. I told you I'd promised myself a nice long session with him in the torture chambers."
"No, he's alive. Very much so.
What? Then produce him, at once.
Padway shook his head. He's where you'll never find him. You see, I figured it would be foolish to waste a good spare king. If anything happened to you, I might need one in a hurry.
You're insubordinate, young man. I won't stand for it. You'll do as your king orders you, or else.
Padway grinned, shaking his head. No, my lord, nobody shall hurt Witiges, and you'd better not get rough with me either. His guards have orders to release him if anything happens to me. He doesn't like you any better than you like him. You can figure the rest out for yourself.
You devil!
Spat the king venomously.
Why, oh why did I ever let you save my life? I haven't had a moment's peace since. You might have a little consideration for an old man, he whined. Let's see, what was I talking about?
Perhaps, said Padway, about the new book we're going to get out in our joint names. It has a perfectly splendid theory about the mutual attraction of masses. Accounts for the movements of the heavenly bodies and all sorts of things. It's called The Law of Gravitation.
Really? Now that's most interesting, Martinus. Most interesting indeed. It would spread my fame as a philosopher to the ends of the earth, wouldn't it?
Padway asked Eunylas if Witiges' nephew, Urias, was in Ravenna. Eunylas said yes, and sent a man to hunt him up. Urias was big and dark like his uncle. He arrived, scowling defiance.
Well, mysterious Martinus, now that you've overthrown my uncle by trickery, what are you going to do with me?
Not a thing, said Padway, unless you force me to.
Aren't you having a purge of my uncle's family?
No, I'm not even purging your uncle. In strict confidence, I'm hiding Witiges to keep Theudahad from harming him.
Really? Can I believe that?
Sure, I'll even get a letter from him, testifying to the good treatment he's getting.
Letters can be produced by torture.
Not with Witiges. For all your uncle's faults, I think you will agree that he's a stubborn chap. Urias relaxed visibly.
That's something. Yes, if that's true, perhaps you'll have some decency after all.
Now, to get down to business, how do you feel about working for us? That is, nominally for King Theudahad, but actually for me. Urias stiffened.
Out of the question. I'm resigning my commission, of course. I won't take any action disloyal to my uncle.
I'm sorry to hear that. I need a good man to command the reoccupation of Dalmatia. Urias shook his head stubbornly.
It's a question of loyalty. I've never gone back on my plighted word yet.
Padway sighed. You're as bad as Belisarius. The few trustworthy and able men in the world won't work with me because of previous obligations, so I have to struggle along with crooks and dimwits. Darkness seemed to want to fall by mere inertia.